Dean Ambrose never comes back, until he does. They said he was done. Gone for good. But when the lights went out at Money in the Bank 2025, something insane happened. Just when Roman Reigns was down, outnumbered, and about to lose it all. Boom. The crowd erupts. That music hits. And he walks out. No one saw it coming. Dean Ambrose, back from the shadows, storms in and flips the whole match upside down. Fists flying. Chairs swinging. Chaos unleashed. And just like that, Roman Reigns snatches victory from the jaws of defeat. This wasn't just a return. It was a statement. And the Bloodline? They just got a whole new problem. Let's break down how Dean Ambrose shocked the world and saved Roman Reigns at MITB 2025. That's what they all said. Every podcast. Every promo. Every diehard fan with a Twitter account and a YouTube theory. Dean Ambrose is gone. Moxley killed that character. He's AEW now. He's not coming back. And for a while, it seemed true. No teases. No cryptic tweets. No interviews with Easter eggs. He was the guy who burned his bridge, poured gasoline on it, and walked away while flipping the match to everything WWE stood for. But then the lights went out at Money in the Bank 2025. And everything changed. The return nobody expected. Roman Reigns was outnumbered. The odds were stacked. Solo Sikoa and the newest Bloodline addition, Jacob Fatu, were pounding Roman into the mat like they'd been waiting years for this moment. The match had spiraled into a full-blown beatdown, chairs, steel steps, announce tables. Roman's run looked over. A tribal dethroning was in progress. The crowd was watching history crumble in real time. And then, darkness. Not silence, because the second those arena lights died, the fans screamed. Not confusion. Because somewhere, in every diehard wrestling fan's gut, they knew. 3 seconds later, a sound no one expected to hear ever again in WWE echoed through the arena. That siren. That gritty guitar riff. That unhinged chaos in music form. Dean. Freaking. Ambrose. The man who bled his way out of WWE. Who threw the company under the bus in interviews. Who reinvented himself in barbed wire matches across the world. Who swore he was never coming back. He just walked out like he never left. The camera cut to Roman, battered, slumped against the ropes, wide-eyed. Commentary froze. Michael Cole didn't even say his name. He couldn't. It was that surreal. Ambrose didn't waste time. No smirk. No long pose on the ramp. He beelined to the ring and brought hell with him. And that's where the moment stopped being cool and started becoming legendary. Let's stop and unpack something. This wasn't just a return. This wasn't just a run-in. This was a decade of emotional investment cashing out in one heartbeat. Dean Ambrose's return was nuclear for a reason, and it wasn't just nostalgia. Think about what Ambrose represented. He was the guy who walked away on his own terms. The one who never said maybe. The anti-company rebel who didn't tease a comeback, didn't string fans along. So, when he returned, not for a title, not for clout, not for a nostalgic pop, but to help the very man he once betrayed? That rewrote the rules. That said something bigger was happening here. It wasn't just a run-in. It was a message. And if you were watching live, you felt it in your chest. The guy who once turned his back on the Shield came back, for Shield business. That's storytelling. That's legacy. That's what makes wrestling more than scripted entertainment. That's what gives it weight. The beginning of something dangerous. Dean didn't speak. He didn't hug Roman. He didn't even stick around after the match. He came in, wrecked the Bloodline's plan, watched Roman climb the ladder, and then vanished through the crowd like a ghost. And in doing so, he left everyone, fans, superstars, commentators, management, asking one thing: why? Why help Roman? Why now? Why break a 6-year silence? This wasn't just nostalgia bait. This wasn't a cheap Shield reunion. This was calculated. Was it revenge on the Bloodline? Was it a message to Seth Rollins, still reigning on Raw? Was this the beginning of an alliance? Or a setup? No one knows. And that's why this moment will be talked about for years. Because sometimes, the loudest story is told with no words at all. Money in the Bank 2025 was never supposed to be about Dean Ambrose. That's what makes what happened even more shocking. Because every story leading into that night was about Roman Reigns, the Bloodline civil war, and whether the tribal chief's reign had finally reached its end. The spotlight was on betrayal, power struggles, and legacies imploding in real time. No one was looking toward the shadows. And that's exactly where Dean Ambrose was waiting. To understand how explosive Ambrose's return was, you need to understand the pressure cooker that MITB 2025 had become. The weeks leading up to it were some of the most chaotic in modern WWE storytelling. Roman Reigns wasn't just fighting for a contract or a briefcase. He was fighting for control, for identity, for survival. The Bloodline wasn't fractured anymore, it was shattered. By June, the once undisputed force in WWE had become a family war zone. Jey Uso was long gone. Jimmy had turned back into an unhinged wildcard. Solo Sikoa was now front and center, rising from loyal enforcer to ruthless power player. And at his side, WWE's most intimidating acquisition of the year, Jacob Fatu. A 280-pound hurricane with speed, power, and no interest in diplomacy. Fatu didn't talk. He destroyed. And he made his intentions clear: Roman Reigns' time was over. The main event was billed as Bloodline Warfare. It wasn't technically a Money in the Bank ladder match, this wasn't about briefcases. It was about dominance. Whoever won walked away with the leverage to call their shot, not just for a title, but for control of the family legacy. Roman Reigns vs. Solo Sikoa and Jacob Fatu in a triple threat style showdown, with interference expected, alliances unpredictable, and no disqualifications in place. The arena was sold out before the final card was even announced. Not because of stipulations. Not because of gimmicks. But because the fans knew, something had to give. For the first time in years, Roman Reigns looked vulnerable. Not just physically, emotionally. His usual stoicism had cracked in recent promos. There were moments of hesitation. Lines delivered with less conviction. Stare-downs that lingered too long. He was a man cornered by his own empire. The story was writing itself, the king was about to fall. WWE leaned into the chaos. The video packages didn't pull punches. They showed Roman manipulating family, holding gold like a tyrant, making demands, turning cousins into pawns. But they also showed the fallout. Solo breaking free. Paul Heyman, caught in the middle. Fatu, descending like a storm. The narrative was no longer about whether Roman would retain. It was about whether he'd survive. By match night, the crowd wasn't split. They were desperate for a turning point. Whether you loved Roman or hated him, everyone knew the chapter was ending. Fans came with signs that read "Long live the Chief" right next to others that said "Solo for Bloodline." There was electricity in the building that couldn't be faked. Commentators fed into the tension. Corey Graves repeatedly said, "This isn't just a match. This is the implosion of an era." Michael Cole whispered on the pre-show, "Roman has no one left. Not Jey. Not Jimmy. And certainly not Seth. The island of relevancy is sinking." It wasn't just the storytelling, it was the optics. Roman walked into the arena alone. No Paul Heyman. No Usos. Just Roman, hoodie up, focused but not dominant. For a man who built his brand on control, walking that aisle alone was a visual signal. His empire was in ruins. Solo and Jacob Fatu entered together. No music interruptions. No pauses for fanfare. Just menace. The crowd didn't boo, they just waited. Because no one was pretending anymore. This wasn't theater. This was the finale of a 5-year war. The bell rang, and within the first 5 minutes, it was obvious this wasn't going to be a traditional WWE match. There were no tags, no structure, no slow build. It was a street fight in disguise. Roman tried to strike first but got swallowed by Fatu's speed. Solo cornered him, landed a Samoan spike, and suddenly Roman was crawling for space less than 10 minutes in. Weapons came into play. Chairs, tables, steel steps. Roman got tossed into the barricade. He barely got in any offense. Every time he stood, he got knocked back down. Fans started chanting for him, not because they supported him, but because they wanted a real fight. They wanted the drama to peak. And it did, when Jacob Fatu powerbombed Roman through the announce table and stood over his motionless body, one boot planted on the wreckage like a warlord. That's when the lights dropped. No pyro. No countdown. Just darkness. Cold, suffocating silence for a full 5 seconds. Then the sound. Raspy guitar. Chaotic drum. A beat that hadn't been heard in a WWE arena since 2019. Dean Ambrose's music. If the roof hadn't already been gone from the last pop, it blew off entirely. The fans didn't just cheer, they screamed. Shock, joy, disbelief, all mixed into one visceral sound. And then the lights returned, and he was there. Black jacket. Black boots. No frills. Just fire in his eyes and a lead pipe in his hand. This wasn't a cameo. This wasn't a legend returning for nostalgia. Dean Ambrose came to fight. In the next 60 seconds, he cleared the ring. Fatu took a pipe shot to the ribs and went down. Solo caught fists to the face and a DDT onto a chair. Roman staggered to his feet mid-chaos, eyes locking with Ambrose for half a second. Dean didn't acknowledge him. He just turned and kept swinging. And in that moment, the MITB 2025 story flipped on its head. Because while every fan thought they were watching the end of Roman Reigns, they were actually watching the resurrection of something else entirely. This wasn't about Roman. This wasn't even about the Bloodline. This was about Dean Ambrose deciding, on his own terms, that the war wasn't over yet. Where was Dean Ambrose? From the moment Dean Ambrose stepped through that curtain at Money in the Bank 2025, one question rang louder than the pop itself: where the hell has he been? Not just physically, people knew where Jon Moxley was. But mentally, emotionally, and professionally, he'd closed the door on WWE. Slammed it, locked it, and tossed the key into the ocean. For years, he didn't tease a return, didn't give soft answers in interviews, didn't drop breadcrumbs for fans to follow. His message was simple: he left for a reason, and he was never coming back. And people believed him. They had good reason to. Rewind to 2019. Ambrose, at the time one of WWE's hottest stars, walked away from the biggest wrestling company in the world. He didn't just leave quietly, he aired his grievances in detail. He talked about creative frustration. About being fed lines that made him cringe. About not trusting the system that helped make him a household name. He described being sick, physically and mentally, of playing a watered-down version of a character he once loved. And when he showed up in AEW just weeks after his WWE exit, he looked alive again. Unchained. Dangerous. Jon Moxley in AEW wasn't just different, it was transformative. The goofy one-liners and awkward backstage skits were gone. What emerged was a fighter who lived and breathed unpredictability. He won titles, carried the company during the pandemic era, and bled in more matches than most do in an entire career. He spoke from the gut. He wrestled like a storm. In many ways, he became what WWE wouldn't let him be. So why would he return now? That's the mystery. Because on paper, he had no reason to. He wasn't washed up. He wasn't out of work. He wasn't clinging to past glory. Moxley was thriving. He was one of AEW's most protected stars, respected across the business, and beloved by fans for his authenticity. Every time someone brought up a WWE return, he shut it down with a laugh or a flat no. He didn't miss the machine. He didn't need the spotlight. He was in control of his own destiny. That's why his return was nuclear. Not just because it was unexpected, but because it broke logic. There was no report. No rumor. Not even a backstage leak. Dean Ambrose didn't just show up. He appeared like a ghost. So where was he? To answer that, you have to look deeper than contracts and bookings. You have to look at identity. Because Dean Ambrose isn't just a name, he's a persona. A chapter of a man's life. And chapters, like wounds, don't always close clean. Even while Jon Moxley thrived in AEW, part of Dean Ambrose lived on in fan culture. Every Shield retrospective. Every Roman vs. Seth storyline. Every what if? Fantasy booking that circled back to the trio that redefined a generation. Whether he liked it or not, that legacy had weight. And while Moxley moved on, WWE never truly did. They kept the door cracked. They ran Shield packages. They replayed his highlights. They referenced him without saying his name. Because they knew, if he ever came back, even for one night, it would be seismic. In 2023, there was a sliver of speculation. He was spotted backstage at a non-televised WWE event. A handshake here, a laugh there. But no deal. No rumors took hold. It was chalked up to visiting old friends. Nothing more. In 2024, he took time off from AEW. A shoulder injury. Recovery. A few indie appearances, then quiet. That's when the silence started to stretch. No public appearances. No interviews. No Twitter. Just radio silence. Fans assumed he was resting. Recharging. Maybe working on a book. The industry is brutal, and even the most committed need to step back sometimes. No one thought he's going to WWE. That wasn't even a conversation. It was an assumption that the door was dead-bolted forever. And that's what makes this return so much bigger than a run-in. It wasn't just Dean Ambrose coming back. It was Jon Moxley choosing, for reasons we don't know, to resurrect a name he buried. To step back into a world he once condemned. To wear a costume he swore off, and to do it without a word. Because he didn't come back with fanfare. He didn't cut a promo. He didn't demand a spotlight. He came back during someone else's war. Slipped in through the fire. Changed the game. And vanished. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe that's where he's been, not hiding, but waiting. Watching from afar. Waiting for the moment that mattered. Not a paycheck. Not a storyline. Not a cheap pop. A moment that meant something. A moment with blood in it. And if you trace the threads back far enough, it all leads to one person. Roman Reigns. The last brother standing. Because if there's one thing Ambrose has always followed, it's his own code. And whether it's revenge, loyalty, unfinished business, or something else entirely, we're not watching a return. We're watching a reckoning. And it started the moment he stepped back into WWE as Dean Ambrose, not to reclaim a throne, but to blow the whole thing up. The opening bell hadn't even rung when the mood in the arena shifted. This wasn't anticipation anymore, it was tension. Thick, suffocating tension. The kind that sits in your chest and doesn't leave. Everyone in the building felt it. The audience knew something was coming, even if they didn't know what. Roman Reigns stood alone in the ring, expression unreadable, hands wrapped in tape, jaw clenched. No Usos. No Paul Heyman. No backup. Just him. The tribal chief, exposed and isolated for the first time in years. He looked like a man who had finally realized the empire he built was turning into the same weapon being used to bury him. Then came the entrance that set the tone, Solo Sikoa and Jacob Fatu walking side by side. No fanfare. No elaborate lights. No slow motion. They marched to the ring like soldiers ready for battle, and the crowd didn't cheer or boo, they just stared. Because this didn't feel like a wrestling match. It felt like a fight for control. The bell rang. And from the first lockup, Roman Reigns was on the back foot. Solo charged him like a cannonball, throwing stiff forearms, mixing in wild headbutts, trying to crush Roman early. Fatu hung back, waiting, letting Solo wear Roman down before tagging in with ruthless efficiency. They didn't even need to talk to each other. They operated like a unit, calculated and brutal. Roman tried to counter. He landed a few uppercuts. He tossed Solo into the corner, landed a Superman punch. But before he could go for the spear, Fatu hit him with a super kick that nearly took his head off. Roman rolled out of the ring and collapsed near the barricade. From that point forward, the match became survival. Chairs were introduced early. Solo pulled one from under the ring and went to work on Roman's back. Fatu, meanwhile, started dismantling the announce table without being prompted. It wasn't about pinfalls or submissions, they wanted to make a statement. Roman, to his credit, fought back. He used the ring post as a weapon, driving Solo's head into it. He caught Fatu off guard with a drive-by kick. There were flashes of the dominant champion we'd seen hold the company hostage for over 3 years. But they were only flashes. Fatu caught him midair with a spinebuster onto the steel steps. Solo tossed him back into the ring like a ragdoll. Double-team maneuvers followed, Samoan drops, tandem strikes, flying headbutts. Every time Roman kicked out, it wasn't power, it was defiance. You could see it in his eyes. He was hurt. He was slowing down. His face told the story, this might be it. The commentary team wasn't helping. Corey Graves was losing faith in real time. This isn't just punishment, this is a message, he said. Michael Cole, usually Roman's biggest hype man, looked uncomfortable. Roman's legacy might be crumbling right here. 10 minutes in, Solo hit a Samoan spike. Roman collapsed. Fatu dragged his body outside and set him on the announce table. The arena started buzzing, not cheering, not booing, just buzzing, like a crowd watching something they're not sure they're supposed to be seeing. Then Fatu climbed to the top rope. The man is 280 pounds and moves like a cruiserweight. And when he leapt for that splash, crashing through Roman and the table, the arena exploded, not in joy, but in disbelief. Roman wasn't moving. He didn't sell it like a guy waiting to get back up. He laid there, one arm twisted under his body, eyes barely open. Solo rolled him back into the ring and covered him. 1. 2, Roman kicked out. Barely. It wasn't a triumphant moment. It wasn't the kind of kickout that made the crowd rally. It was desperation. The message was clear, this wasn't the Roman Reigns who controlled every match. This was the Roman Reigns trying not to die in the middle of the ring. Fatu grabbed a chair. Solo grabbed another. They circled Roman like vultures. And that's when it happened. The lights shut off. Total blackness. No countdown. No warning. Just gone. And for a full 5 seconds, the world held its breath. Then the sirens hit. That old familiar guitar riff. That unpolished, chaotic sound that once belonged to a man everyone thought was never coming back. Dean Ambrose's theme. The noise in the arena reached a volume that can't be measured. People weren't cheering. They were yelling. Some were crying. Some just stared, mouths open. A fan in the third row collapsed to their knees. The lights returned, and he was standing at the top of the ramp. No shield vest. No new gimmick. Just jeans, boots, jacket, and fury. The match didn't just change, it detonated. Ambrose sprinted down the ramp like a man with nothing to lose. Fatu dropped the chair. Solo hesitated. Too late. Dean slid into the ring, ducked a strike, drove a chair into Solo's gut, then cracked him across the back. Fatu lunged, caught a clothesline so hard it flipped him. The crowd couldn't keep up. They were watching one of the most unexpected moments in wrestling history, and it was happening too fast to process. Roman crawled to the ropes, pulled himself up, and looked at the man in front of him. Dean didn't speak. He didn't pose. He didn't nod. He just picked up the chair again and turned back toward the chaos. Roman Reigns had just been handed a lifeline. The match wasn't over, but the momentum had swung. And for the first time all night, the tribal chief had backup. There are returns. And then there are returns. Wrestling history is full of shocking comebacks: Cena at the Rumble, Edge's miraculous return, The Rock's surprise appearances. But what happened at Money in the Bank 2025 wasn't just another entry in that list. It was something different. Something raw. Something real. Not because it was perfectly choreographed or teased for weeks, but because it broke the unspoken rules. It was the kind of moment that felt less like a scripted swerve and more like a cosmic glitch in the WWE timeline. Let's rewind 5 seconds. The crowd was watching Roman Reigns get dismantled. Fatu and Solo were circling him with chairs, setting up for what felt like a final, career-ending beatdown. Roman was still on the mat, breathing heavy, eyes barely open. There was no comeback in sight. Then the lights dropped. Instant silence. Not the dramatic kind WWE usually cues up. Real, confused silence. For a heartbeat, the arena was a vacuum. No chants. No cheers. No music. Then came the sound. That sound. That unmistakable, gritty guitar riff, loaded with static and distortion. A track that hadn't blasted through WWE speakers in over half a decade. Dean Ambrose's entrance theme. The reaction wasn't a pop. It wasn't even a cheer. It was an explosion. A detonation of 5 years of speculation, denial, and disbelief. Thousands of people screaming as if they'd all seen a ghost, and they had. Because in that moment, the past came crashing into the present. The lights returned. There he was. At the top of the ramp. Dean Ambrose. No slick gear. No modern update. Just jeans. A black jacket. Boots worn from wars and other promotions. Unshaven. Unbothered. Unchanged. He stood there for 2 seconds, maybe 3, before he moved. No smile. No soaking in the moment. No time for nostalgia. Just a straight sprint toward the ring. And what followed was chaos. Solo tried to meet him mid-run. Ambrose ducked under a lariat and cracked him with a forearm that sent him staggering into the ropes. Fatu moved in next. Chair in hand. He raised it high, and caught a boot to the gut. Ambrose ripped the chair out of his hand, flipped it in the air, and drove it straight down across his spine. The sound of metal on flesh echoed like a gunshot. Roman, half lifted on one knee, looked up with a mix of confusion and awe. His former brother, the man who walked out of the company, the man who never teased coming back, was now clearing house in his name. But Ambrose didn't look at Roman. He never even acknowledged him. His focus was entirely on destruction. Solo rolled outside the ring, clutching his ribs. Fatu was down, face buried in the mat. Dean stood over him, chair in hand, breathing heavy. This wasn't a feel-good reunion. It didn't have the energy of redemption or closure. It was something colder. More primal. Dean Ambrose didn't come back for applause. He came back for war. Commentary was speechless. Michael Cole tried to get words out but stumbled through them. That's Dean Ambrose. I can't believe what I'm seeing. Corey Graves didn't say anything for a full 20 seconds. WWE didn't hit the Shield music. There was no shield pose. No fist bump. No spoken alliance. Ambrose turned, looked at Roman for the first time, and dropped the chair. Roman's eyes narrowed. He didn't smile. He didn't nod. He just stared. And in that pause, the crowd got even louder. Because that look between them wasn't brotherhood. It wasn't resentment. It was recognition. They weren't friends. They weren't enemies. They were two survivors. Roman pulled himself to his feet using the ropes. He limped toward the corner. Solo was still down on the outside. Fatu was crawling. Ambrose didn't stick around. He slid out of the ring, climbed the barricade, and disappeared through the crowd. No music. No words. No commentary. Just gone. The match wasn't over. Not technically. But it might as well have been. Roman climbed the ladder slowly. Every rung felt earned. Fatu tried to reach up, but his body wouldn't move fast enough. Solo couldn't stand. And there was no one left to help them. The crowd counted each step. 1, 2, 3. When Roman reached the top and grabbed the briefcase, the arena exploded again, but not like earlier. This time, it wasn't about surprise. It was about understanding. Because everyone in that building knew the truth, Roman Reigns didn't win that match alone. He was saved. By a ghost. By the man no one expected. By a former brother who walked through hell and came back with fire in his eyes. Dean Ambrose didn't come back for glory. He came back to remind everyone that in this world, nothing stays buried forever. The energy in the arena didn't settle after Dean Ambrose disappeared, it intensified. There was no relief. No resolution. Just confusion and raw adrenaline. Roman Reigns stood at the top of the ladder, briefcase in hand, his chest heaving. Sweat poured down his face. His arm trembled slightly as he held the case aloft. But the crowd wasn't just reacting to victory. They were reacting to the aftershock of what had just happened. Dean Ambrose had returned to WWE like a grenade with the pin already pulled, and the ring was still shaking from the blast. Roman descended the ladder with the deliberate caution of a man not yet convinced the war was over. He looked down at Solo Sikoa and Jacob Fatu, both wrecked and rolling on the floor outside the ring. No referees had stepped in. No medical staff. Everyone was frozen, waiting for what might happen next. Then Roman did something nobody expected. He walked over to the chair Dean had dropped. Picked it up. Looked at it. He didn't use it. He just stared. It wasn't symbolic. It wasn't dramatic. It was surgical. Roman Reigns is a man who calculates everything. And right now, he was trying to solve the problem that had just entered his world again. Because make no mistake, Dean Ambrose wasn't back to play sidekick. He had just inserted himself into one of the most volatile storylines in WWE history. And the way he did it, without speaking, without aligning, without even stopping, was intentional. It raised questions. Was he back for good? Was this a one-time strike? Was he targeting the Bloodline or Roman himself? Backstage, cameras caught glimpses of chaos. Producers yelling into headsets. Security looking clueless. Paul Heyman pacing in the hallway, phone pressed to his ear, eyes wild. No one had answers. And that's when the carnage truly began. Not in the ring, but in the ecosystem around it. Online, the reaction was instantaneous. Within minutes, the words Dean Ambrose trended worldwide, breaking through algorithm filters and sports walls alike. Twitter, Reddit, Discord, the wrestling world exploded in real time. Clips circulated faster than WWE could upload them. Fan cams from the upper decks captured raw reactions, people openly weeping, screaming into their phones. This wasn't just nostalgia. This was disruption. On commentary, the shock finally gave way to questions. Corey Graves tried to frame it as an act of honor. Dean Ambrose saw his brother getting beaten down and did what no one else would, he stepped in. But Michael Cole took a darker view. We don't know why he came back. And I'm not convinced it was to help Roman. Maybe it was to send a warning. That's the thing about Ambrose, he doesn't operate on clean motivation. He's a chaos engine. His actions never come prepackaged with reasons. He burns everything and lets people figure it out later. And the aftermath of MITB 2025 was a battlefield of theories. Some believed it was revenge. Not on Roman, but on the Bloodline, for poisoning the very foundation of WWE. Others speculated it was about unfinished business, a shield that was never truly broken, just scattered. There were those who thought Ambrose saw a version of himself in Solo Sikoa, the unhinged, loyal enforcer turned loose cannon. Maybe this was a warning. I know what you're becoming. I know where this ends. But the one theory that gained traction fast, because it was the most terrifying, was this: Dean Ambrose didn't save Roman Reigns. He set the stage to destroy him. Think about it. Dean doesn't owe Roman anything. If anything, their history is stained with betrayal, distrust, and damage. Roman was the corporate pick. The chosen one. Ambrose was always the stray dog, fighting for scraps, shoved into comedy bits while Roman was draped in gold. So maybe this wasn't about saving Roman. Maybe this was about making sure Roman won, so Dean could take it from him himself. That's the kind of logic Ambrose operates on. Not titles. Not revenge. Impact. He didn't want to watch Roman fall to Solo and Fatu. He wanted to beat him at his best. And the way he fought in that ring backed up the theory. There was no hesitation. No signs of rust. He hadn't missed a step. The shots he landed were precise, savage, and professional. He wasn't reacting. He was executing a plan. Meanwhile, in the locker room, the entire roster was reportedly stunned. Multiple sources said Ambrose hadn't been seen backstage before the match. No one knew he was in the building. The locker room reaction ranged from disbelief to outright anxiety. Because when Dean Ambrose is back, nobody's safe. And WWE knows it. That's why Triple H reportedly called an emergency creative meeting the following morning. That's why talent started asking questions about contracts and creative protection. Because when you unleash a wild card, every chess piece on the board is suddenly at risk. And Dean Ambrose? He's not a pawn. He's not a rook. He's the guy who walks onto the board and flips it over just to see what happens. When Dean Ambrose stepped through that curtain at Money in the Bank 2025, he wasn't just bringing chaos, he was dragging history behind him like a live wire. Every fan in the arena who screamed at his return wasn't just reacting to the moment. They were reacting to a memory. A decade's worth of trauma, betrayal, violence, and brotherhood, all tied to 3 letters that reshaped modern wrestling: the Shield. The moment Ambrose laid waste to the Bloodline, the wrestling world didn't just remember who he was. They remembered who they all were: Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and Dean Ambrose. 3 men who stormed WWE in black combat gear and flipped the script on what a faction could be. A brotherhood built not on gimmicks or legacy, but on dominance. Pure, relentless dominance. And now, one of those brothers had returned to save another from being crushed by his own kingdom. But before we talk about what that means now, we have to go back to where it started. The Shield debuted in 2012, cutting through WWE like a scalpel. They weren't just booked strong, they were booked different. Tactical. Cold. Organized. They didn't run from fights, they ran toward them. Power bombs through tables. Triple team beatdowns. High-impact chaos with military precision. It wasn't just cool, it was revolutionary. They weren't tag team partners. They weren't a stable. They were a unit. Dean Ambrose was the mouthpiece, the erratic philosopher. Seth Rollins was the architect, the high-flying tactician. Roman Reigns was the muscle, the silent hammer. For 2 years, they ran through everyone. John Cena, Daniel Bryan, the Wyatt family, Evolution. You name it, the Shield left them broken in their wake. And then, betrayal. June 2, 2014. Seth Rollins turned. He didn't tease it. He didn't threaten it. He just grabbed a chair and caved in Ambrose's back before hitting Roman with another. It was one of the most visceral heel turns in wrestling history, not because it was shocking, but because it hurt. It felt personal. The betrayal wasn't just against the characters, it was against the fans. And how did Ambrose react? He unraveled. Not in the cheesy wrestling trope sense, but in a way that felt authentic. He didn't just feud with Rollins, he obsessed over him. Promos got darker. Matches got bloodier. Ambrose stopped pretending he was okay. Because he wasn't. He had been stabbed in the back by someone he called a brother. Fast forward to 2017. After years of separation, heel turns, injuries, and character shifts, the Shield reunited. Fans exploded. It felt like closure. Roman, Seth, and Dean standing together again, older, scarred, but aligned. They weren't the same men, but maybe, just maybe, they could finish what they started. But that reunion didn't last. Injury sidelined Ambrose. Upon returning, he turned on Seth, on the night Roman Reigns announced his leukemia diagnosis. The timing wasn't just dark, it was intentional. WWE scripted it that way, but Ambrose owned it. He delivered promos from parking garages, burned his Shield vest, and claimed Seth was weak. It was uncomfortable. And real. It was also the beginning of the end. By 2019, Ambrose was done. You could see it in his body language. The fire was gone. Promos felt forced. Segments turned ridiculous. The final straw was a storyline where he received a shot in the backside from a doctor, played for comedy. Jon Moxley later said that's when he knew, "I'm done." He left WWE that year, letting his contract expire. No fanfare. No farewell tour. He just vanished. But the memory of the Shield didn't. Roman carried the image in every title reign. Seth referenced it in feuds. Even the fans couldn't let it go. Every time 2 Shield members faced off, the third's name trended. Every time someone walked through the crowd, someone whispered, "Remember when they used to," because the Shield wasn't just a team. It was an era. And now, in 2025, Dean Ambrose had returned not to reform it, but to haunt it. When he stepped into that ring at MITB, he didn't hug Roman. He didn't help him up. He didn't even make eye contact until the chaos was over. Why? Because this isn't 2014. These aren't brothers anymore. They're relics of a machine that used them, broke them, and then moved on. Ambrose came back for one reason, to make an impact that mattered. And whether that impact will bring him closer to Roman, or set them on a path to war, remains to be seen. But one thing is clear, the Shield's shadow is long. And no matter how far these men run, they're still standing in it. After the dust settled, after the chairs stopped swinging and the crowd caught its breath, all eyes went back to one thing, the ladder. It still stood tall in the center of the ring. Slightly dented. Still dangerous. Still holding what Roman Reigns came for, the Money in the Bank briefcase. The symbol of leverage. Control. A future championship on Roman's terms. And now, thanks to an uninvited ghost from the past, it was within reach. Roman didn't rush. He never does. It's what separates him from most of the locker room. He's deliberate. Calculated. Every step has a reason. And as he looked around at the wreckage left behind, Solo Sikoa writhing outside the ring, Jacob Fatu clutching his ribs near the barricade, he knew the window was open. But this wasn't just about climbing a ladder. This was a man rising from the ashes of his own empire. Roman walked toward the ladder slowly. He paused at its base, his fingers twitching. Then, with a grunt, he grabbed the first rung. 1 foot. Then the other. His pace was methodical, but strained. His body was worn from the fight. His ribs were bruised. His right shoulder had taken a full blast from a steel chair earlier. This wasn't a triumphant climb. This was survival. Each step sounded louder than the last. The arena was dead silent. Not because the fans weren't cheering, but because they were watching history. The kind of silence that says, we might never see something like this again. Roman reached the halfway point and looked down. Fatu was pushing himself up on the outside. His mouth was bleeding. His eyes were glassy. But he wasn't done. Not yet. Inside the ring, Solo had made it to one knee. He grabbed the apron, pulled himself toward the ropes. Roman saw it. He could have rushed. Climbed faster. He didn't. He turned his head and looked toward the entrance ramp. No sign of Ambrose. Gone. Just as quickly as he arrived, he had vanished, into the crowd, into the dark, into legend. Roman turned back. One more step. 2. His hands touched the top of the ladder. Fatu reached under the ropes. Solo staggered toward the base of the ladder, groaning. Roman didn't wait for them to make it. He reached up, fingers wrapping around the hook, and unlatched the briefcase with a sharp snap. And that was it. Roman Reigns was once again in control. The bell didn't ring, this wasn't a traditional match. There were no officials raising hands. No pyro. No music. Just Roman, standing on top of the ladder, briefcase in hand, looking down at the destruction. And here's what made the moment unforgettable, he didn't smile. He didn't pose. He didn't raise the briefcase over his head like it was a trophy. He looked exhausted. Hollow. Because he knew what everyone else knew. This wasn't a win. It was a warning. A message written in blood and steel chairs. A reminder that his past is never really in the past. That no matter how many people he outsmarts, outlasts, or overpowers, there's always someone waiting in the shadows. Roman climbed down, every movement stiff and deliberate. He rolled out of the ring and walked up the ramp alone. The camera followed him, framing the carnage in the background, Fatu down, Solo motionless, the ladder toppled. And still, no sign of Ambrose. Backstage, nobody could find him. Security swept the arena. He wasn't in the locker rooms. He didn't check in with production. No interviews. No social media post. No WWE.com exclusive. He was there. Then he wasn't. Which only made the impact more devastating. Because the mystery is the message. Roman Reigns might have left money in the bank with the briefcase, but the real story, the real war, was just beginning. And somewhere, out there, Dean Ambrose was already thinking about his next move. Within minutes of the broadcast ending, the explosion inside the arena at Money in the Bank 2025 rippled outward. Social media went into absolute overdrive. Reddit threads multiplied by the second. YouTube channels rushed to upload reactions, breakdowns, frame-by-frame analysis of Dean Ambrose's return. Wrestling Twitter turned into a war zone of speculation and disbelief. And across the WWE locker room, silence reigned. Not because no one had anything to say, but because no one knew what to say. This wasn't a scripted nostalgia pop. This wasn't a welcome home moment built for merchandise and hashtags. It was an ambush. A strike out of nowhere. And the message was written all over Roman Reigns' face as he walked up the ramp with the briefcase, "This isn't over." Multiple backstage sources described the atmosphere after the show as frozen. People who had worked for WWE for decades said they hadn't seen that kind of genuine confusion since CM Punk walked out in 2014. Top stars were asking producers, was that cleared? Is he actually back? Some of the younger talent didn't even know who Dean Ambrose was, they knew Jon Moxley. To them, this was myth becoming real. One anonymous source told Wrestling Media, nobody saw him all day. No one in Gorilla. No buzz. No whispers. We just saw him on the monitor and lost our minds like the fans did. That's how protected this moment was. Triple H, reportedly one of the few people who knew, had been playing everything close to the chest. No promos. No hints. No PR build-up. He let it breathe. He let it be real. And it worked. Because by the time Dean Ambrose vanished into the crowd, WWE wasn't just trending. It was the story. Within an hour, #Dean Ambrose, #MITB, and #Roman Reigns were the top 3 trending topics globally. Memes, clips, and screenshots exploded across every social platform. Some fans joked about needing CPR. Others posted side-by-side comparisons of Ambrose in AEW versus his MITB appearance. Theories poured in. Wild, creative, some bordering on unhinged, but all fueled by the same question, why? Fan forums were flooded with possible explanations. Was this the beginning of a Shield reunion or a Shield implosion? Did Ambrose sign a new deal with WWE, or is this a one-off appearance? Was he targeting the Bloodline, or Roman himself? Some fans speculated this was revenge. Others said it was protection. A vocal subset believed Dean was there to manipulate Roman, help him win, then twist the knife later. Whatever the reason, one thing was clear, everyone was talking. This wasn't just a great return. It had shaken the entire structure of WWE storytelling. On Instagram Live, Seth Rollins, WWE champion and longtime Shield alum, offered only a single sentence before signing off, well. Just got complicated. Becky Lynch posted a simple eye emoji on Twitter. Kevin Owens tweeted, I told you guys the lunatic was never done. Sami Zayn posted a gif of himself looking around nervously. The reactions weren't just in character. They were real. Wrestlers were reacting like fans. Because Dean Ambrose didn't just return to the ring, he returned to their world. And that meant new threats, new alliances, new danger. Backstage agents were reportedly scrambling to adjust future storylines. Title feuds, faction rivalries, even SummerSlam plans were suddenly in flux. Because when a figure like Ambrose returns, everything bends around it. This wasn't just nostalgia. This was impact. Within 24 hours, every major sports outlet was covering it. ESPN ran a front-page story. Ambrose returns, MITB stunned, is WWE's most unpredictable man back for good? Bleacher Report wrote, The Ambrose Enigma, what his return means for Roman, the Shield, and WWE's future. Podcasts dropped emergency episodes. Analysts who had buried WWE for years were suddenly singing its praises. Not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. Ambrose said nothing. No promo. No tweet. No backstage interview. And that silence created a vacuum. One that everyone wanted to fill. By Monday morning, WWE issued a one-line press release, Dean Ambrose has returned to WWE programming. Further developments will unfold live on Raw. No elaboration. No spoilers. No promises. The episode of Raw that followed pulled the highest first-hour ratings in nearly 5 years. Fans didn't tune in for a title match or a tag team brawl. They tuned in to see if Ambrose would show up again. He didn't. Instead, Roman Reigns opened the show. No entrance pyro. No tribal gear. Just street clothes and a briefcase slung over his shoulder. He stood in the ring for 30 seconds without speaking. Then he said, You want to know why I didn't climb that ladder sooner? Because I knew who was coming. The crowd went silent. Then he added, and I didn't stop him. Because part of me knew, I'd rather face the devil I used to know, than the monsters I created. And that was it. No Shield music. No ambush. Just a message. The fallout wasn't explosive. It was psychological. Everyone knew Ambrose was back. But no one, not the Bloodline, not Roman, not WWE, knew what he wanted. That's what made the fallout so dangerous. Because when someone as volatile as Dean Ambrose returns from the void, it doesn't matter what he does next. It matters that you can't stop him. The Bloodline fractures further before Money in the Bank 2025, the Bloodline was already cracking. After it, it started to collapse. What Dean Ambrose did in 10 minutes. Without a mic, without a promo, without a single line of dialogue, was ignite a fuse inside the most dominant faction in modern WWE history. One well-placed act of chaos at the worst possible moment exposed what many had suspected for months: the Bloodline wasn't unified anymore. It was a ticking time bomb. And Roman Reigns knew it. Because the moment he walked backstage after MITB, briefcase in hand, he wasn't greeted by Paul Heyman. There were no hugs. No celebration. Just silence. Cold, awkward silence from the crew and blank stares from the roster. The message was clear: you didn't win that on your own. The man who built an empire based on absolute control had just been saved by the one person he never saw coming. And that act, however unplanned or unsolicited, shattered the Bloodline's illusion of power. Solo Sikoa, the powder keg Solo Sikoa, wasn't just furious. He was humiliated. He was supposed to be the new heir. The enforcer who outgrew his orders. The one who dethroned the chief. And he was minutes away from doing it. Until Ambrose happened. Backstage reports say Solo had a heated conversation with agents post-match. Not in character. Not as part of a promo. Real anger. He felt robbed. Not by Roman, but by the interference. And that's what changes the dynamic. Solo no longer sees Roman as the tyrant. He sees Dean as the threat. That's dangerous. Because Solo isn't a talker. He's a destroyer. And when men like him feel disrespected, they don't cut promos. They make statements with their fists. Expect retaliation. Expect it soon. Jacob Fatu, a weapon without a target. Jacob Fatu's role in the Bloodline was simple: wreck whatever Roman valued. But when Ambrose entered the picture, the strategy fell apart. Fatu wasn't prepared for a wildcard. He was prepared for a dethroning. And now, for the first time, the fans saw something rare in him: hesitation. Ambrose didn't just beat him down. He made Fatu look mortal. That image is lethal to a character built on fear and invincibility. Rumors backstage suggest Fatu is already lobbying for a singles match with Ambrose. He doesn't care about titles. He wants redemption. And he wants it violently. But here's the catch: Ambrose doesn't show up on anyone's schedule. And that's going to drive Fatu insane. Paul Heyman, the man with no island, and then there's Heyman. The wise man, the strategist, the puppet master behind the Bloodline's meteoric rise. But now? He's nowhere to be found. He wasn't at Roman's side at MITB. He hasn't spoken publicly since. And word from backstage is that Heyman has gone into lockdown mode, avoiding interviews, ducking talent meetings, refusing to comment on Ambrose's return. Because Heyman knows what most don't want to admit: Ambrose breaks systems. He's not a chess piece. He's not even a player on the board. He's the guy who knocks the board over and watches it burn. And for a man like Heyman, who survives on control, strategy, and long-term manipulation, Ambrose is a virus in the code. The Bloodline was once a machine. Precise. Ruthless. Now it's limping. Wounded. Defensive. And Heyman? He might be looking for the exit before the walls fully collapse. Roman Reigns, the eye of the storm. Here's the paradox: Roman won. He's holding the briefcase. He left MITB technically victorious. But he doesn't feel like a winner. He feels like a man who didn't die in the war, but didn't win it, either. And Roman's never been good at vulnerability. Since 2020, he's been the tribal chief. The head of the table. The champion who decides who gets to breathe. But when Ambrose returned, he wasn't in control. He was a target of mercy. And mercy doesn't sit well with Roman. Now, he's quiet. Paranoid. Calculating. Reports from SmackDown's tapings say he's been refusing scripted promos. Demanding rewrites. Asking for more control over creative direction. Because he knows what's coming. He doesn't trust Solo. He doesn't trust Heyman. And somewhere deep down, he knows Ambrose didn't save him out of loyalty. He saved him because he's not done with him yet. The public crack. WWE hasn't made an official statement about the Bloodline's internal fracture, but their actions speak louder than words. On the next episode of SmackDown, a scheduled tag match featuring Solo and Fatu never happened. The two argued in the parking lot. Fatu walked out. Solo stood in the ring alone. Backstage cameras caught Roman watching on a monitor, stone-faced. That was the public crack. The visual confirmation that the Bloodline isn't a family anymore. It's a battlefield. And Dean Ambrose? He's not in the ring. He's not on commentary. He's not in the promo package. He's watching. Waiting. Because the best way to destroy a dynasty isn't from the outside. It's to set the family on fire, and let them burn each other.